24 hours. I have to say that during COVID, obviously, and I have been seeing the same therapist for several years, we switched to teletherapy. I don't know what else you call it. We have FaceTime they have a, mechanism, and I like it. And I don't know if I'm going to go back into the office when it's okay to do so.
It's more convenient.
For the most part, it's just as effective, if not more, in some respects. And it's certainly much, much more convenient.
Yeah.
But that is, I have to say, that has been one of those things that we're going to come out of the pandemic, and I think is going to change. And the beauty of BetterHelp, however, is that once it connects you with a therapist, unlike the way that you traditionally find a therapist, if you don't think it's a good fit, you can switch to a new one at any time for any reason at no additional charge. There's nothing worse than finally going to see a therapist, deciding after a couple of sessions that it's no good, and then it's taking you several months to get back into therapy with a different one. That's one of the biggest pluses of BetterHelp. They have thousands of licensed therapists. They're from all over the country. They have therapists with specialties that may not be available in your area. BetterHelp also tends to be more affordable than therapists you'd find through traditional means. You don't have to have insurance to use BetterHelp, and they have financial aid options for those who qualify. BetterHelp is giving everyone in our audience 10% off your first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Majority Report. BetterHelp.com/Majority Report. You can find the URL in our video description if you're watching on this on YouTube, or in our podcast description if you're getting it as a podcast. Okay, I want to welcome to the program senior correspondent at Vox, author of The Agenda: How a Republican Supreme Court is Reshaping America. Ian, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Good to be here. Thanks so much.
Congratulations on the book. It is, in many respects, I think, you and I have spoken over the years, and so much of this stuff, you have educated this audience about things that have been coming down the pike, and we've sort of crossed that toll, and we're now, to belabor a metaphor, we have done the on-ramp and we're on the pike now. It is no longer coming down the pike. We are there. And the idea, the premise of your book is that Republicans no longer, in part because they can't maybe, but they no longer have to rely on legislating to fundamentally change Americans' relationship with government and with society in some respects. So just lay that down for us, and then we'll get into the specifics. You have really four, silos in which our society is really going to dramatically change. But just give us the overall premise.
Sure. So, I started writing this book at the end of kind of a lost decade in Congress. So from 2011, when Republicans took the House and basically denied President Obama a governing majority, until 2020, when the pandemic hit and, non-action became untenable, Congress basically did nothing. There's the Trump tax bill, but there was hardly any major legislation enacted for a decade. And in the same period, the Supreme Court dismantled campaign finance law. It hobbled the Voting Rights Act. It weakened the ban on sexual harassment. It held that religious liberty claims can be used to overcome employees' rights. It halted President Obama's Clean Power Plan, his most ambitious effort to fight climate change. It weakened unions. And then, lest you think it was all bad news, there was also the marriage equality decision in there. But the point is that the Supreme Court became the locus of policymaking in the United States. Congress was unable to do anything. The president has fairly limited powers, and the Supreme Court is now working to limit the president's powers even more. And so the one unelected branch of government, and the branch where Republicans now have a 2/3 supermajority, has become the primary policymaking body in the United States. And, regardless of whether you like what they're doing or not, I think that's pretty scary because, we should want to be governed by the sort of people that we can throw out of office and not by unelected judges who serve for life.
And there's a certain irony there because ostensibly a lot of these members of the Supreme Court would ostensibly agree with you. But many of the things that you outline here, particularly in chapter 2, is making it impossible in some ways for there to be, for that to happen, where a government, someone who's been elected to office, the president and their administration, is really unable to execute a lot of policy because of the polarization we have in the country and the sort of the structural changes that are going to be that the Supreme Court's going to be involved in. And so let me just ask you that one more general question. The 6-3 court represents a danger, it seems to me, that is sort of fundamentally different, broadly speaking, than what we've had in the recent memory, because they are going to be tackling sort of some structural things that function like proxies. They're not going to necessarily decide on one narrow instance at the EPA, but they could end up promoting a doctrine or changing things in such a way that they're going to defang all agencies, and they're going to deny people the franchise to vote in some respects, and they're going to deny people access to the courts, and they're going to allow religion to trump some other sort of societal principles, all which seem to me to be very structural in what they're going to tackle.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, the general thesis of the book is that the Supreme Court is making a two-pronged attack on democracy. And the first prong is that they're just going after voting rights. They're legitimizing partisan gerrymanders. They're dismantling the Voting Rights Act. The reason why you're seeing these voter suppression laws out of Georgia and Florida and probably Texas and Arizona very soon is because the lawmakers in those states know they can get away with it. And they can get away with it because the Supreme Court is telling them that they can get away with it. And at the same time that the court is dismantling voting rights so that it's harder and harder for the Democratic Party to compete fairly in elections, they are also dismantling the government's ability to function so that if someone like Joe Biden manages to slip through the cracks, despite all the efforts that are being made to prevent Democrats from voting, then he will be a very weak president. And so let me give you an example of how this works. There's two ways that Congress can regulate. One is they can just pass a law saying you must do this thing. So like if they want power plants to have less pollution, they could say you must install this device that reduces emissions. The problem with that approach is that technology changes, and if Congress had passed that kind of law in 1974, there would now be obsolete technology in all these power plants, and the law actually might do more harm than good. So what Congress did instead is they passed the Clean Air Act. And the Clean Air Act says that power plants have to use the best available technology. That's the words of the statute, the best available technology to reduce emissions. And it is up to the EPA to determine what the best available technology is at any given moment. So they can constantly update its regulations to say, oh, there's this new thing, so now you have to use this. And the idea is it's still democratic. Congress still sets the policy that the best available technology should be used, but it's also dynamic. Congress doesn't have to go in and pass a new law every time that someone invents a new thing. And the Supreme Court is now trying to dismantle, and there are at least 5 votes for it, Congress's ability to delegate power to agencies in this way, or at least the Supreme Court wants to give itself a veto power over everything that is done to regulate by an agency. And that's, again, really troubling. Like I said, what we're seeing is a two-pronged attack on democracy. On the one hand, they want to make it very, very hard for certain people to cast a ballot. And on the other hand, they want to make it so that if someone like Joe Biden slips through, then Joe Biden isn't actually able to govern because the Supreme Court can veto anything that he tries to do.
I want to spend a little more time on this, because the principle that you've outlined, is it the delegation? It escapes me at the moment. The delegation principle. What is it? The non-delegation.
Non-delegation doctrine is what conservatives call this veto power they want to give to the Supreme Court.
Will you just expand a little bit on the EPA is a great example, but give people a sense of the scope of what could this implicate, and when we've seen this in the past.
Yeah, so I mean, there's all kinds of laws that delegate power to agencies in this sort of way. Like the Labor Department has the power to decide who gets paid overtime regulations. The Department of Health and Human Services has all kinds of powers to determine what sort of insurance we get, and like how doctors can't discriminate, and how hospitals have to be run, and what you have to do if you want Medicare, and so on and so forth. And I mean, all of this could potentially fall. I mean, let me give you an example of what I think is going to be the first major. I mean, this lawsuit has already been filed. It's making its way up through the courts now. There's a provision of the Affordable Care Act which says that health insurers have to cover certain preventive care. And then various agencies within the Department of Health and Human Services has the power to add items to this list of required coverage. And it's a long list. It's about 80 items. It's everything from like vision care for children to pap smears to birth control, various forms of cancer screening. There's a lot of like very routine health procedures on this list. And there's a lawsuit right now that I think is going to prevail, which argues that it is illegal for Congress to give these agencies, to give these bodies within the federal government the power to add items to this list. And once that's struck down, that means no more free birth control. That means no more free cancer screenings. That means no more free pediatric care. It means no more free a lot of things that we are all getting from our insurance company right now. So everyone's insurance is about to get a lot worse because of the Supreme Court.
And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is the reason why you want, in this instance, again, HHS to do that is like they're getting data coming in and saying, you know what? If folks have a regular colonoscopy, or they have a regular new screening for this type of cancer, we can save X number of lives, and we've just found that out. And we know that Congress is never going to pass anything like that. This is what I think is really important for people to understand here. The Republicans could not vote down the ACA. They tried, they couldn't do it. That is, in our very messy system, an expression of the will of the people, right? I mean, it's a little blurry, but that is about as good as it gets for us. And this is the court coming in. They did it with Medicaid by basically saying that the states can and they're doing it now with what the patient protection part of the ACA is, which is, we're not going to allow you to call it insurance unless it provides these essential care things. And now they're assaulting that. And so this is all, when they do this stuff, it is a proxy for a whole other set of things that actually impact people on a daily basis.
Right. And it's important to understand why it's necessary for Congress to delegate power in this way. So it's not just that, like, the HHS might get new data showing that colonoscopies are good. It's that, for example, perhaps a novel coronavirus might emerge that Congress couldn't possibly have known about in 2010 because it didn't exist when the ACA was passed. And, right now we're in a period where like the government is buying up a bunch of vaccines and everyone can get one for free. But that's probably not going to be like, once we've got this thing under control, that's probably not going to be the permanent state of how we control COVID-19. Like the permanent state is we're probably going to need annual or at least frequent booster shots. And at some point, it's not going to make sense for the government to go and buy up a bunch of shots and give them to everyone. It's going to make sense to integrate that into the normal health system. So you go to your doctor, your insurance